oil. They don't have working people with them because these people are not credible, right?
And now Mubarak has said this is a foreign conspiracy.
Yes, right. And Baradei jets in from his apartment in Vienna, where he spends his time with his money from the Soros-Brzezinski International Crisis Group, right, who were part of the action in Tunisia. And this is simply not credible. Now, Moody's today has downgraded Egypt. Now, this is the Wall Street attack. If you look at the internal arrangements in Egypt, what does Wall Street care about in a place like Egypt? Obviously, they want to attack the bread subsidy because this will lead to tremendous instability. When the U.S. says they want to, revise or review the aid posture, right, the $1.5 billion or $3 billion, depending on how you count it, that Egypt gets every year, at the heart of this is money to buy food on the world market.
And by the way, none of this is your opinion. In the IMF, World Bank, Exim Bank documents we've gotten off and on the last 30 years, the biggest data dump, 2002, they admit they go in to third world countries and say, we'll give you loans, but get rid of subsidies. And behind the scenes, they're rubbing their hands together going, get our takeover revolution ready. We'll really loot them now. I mean, they know what they're doing. They're trying to set the atmosphere. They're trying to set the table for this, clearly trying to destabilize the Middle East.
Right. A lot of people in this demonstration are the rich elitists of Cairo North. In other words, the comfortable middle class and up, people who have the Internet and who care about Twitter and the rest of this stuff. When they say economic reform, that generally means destroy the subsidies, free market, right? Free market, free trade, globalization, the reign of international finance capital and all the rest of it. The response from Mubarak to all this, and let me just say, Moody's says the reason they're downgrading Egypt's debt is that they're afraid that Mubarak will increase social expenditure, have a higher minimum wage, increase the food subsidies, this sort of thing, and they don't want this. Therefore, they want to have a speculative run on the Egyptian pound and on Egyptian government debt. So he's going to have to respond with protectionist measures of his own. The obvious thing for Mubarak to do is raise the minimum wage, get the price of bread and cooking oil and fuel down, kick out the International Monetary Fund, declare a debt moratorium, and then what are the resources of Egypt? Well, you got the Nile. Okay, the Aswan High Dam is there. Give the Nile the full Tennessee Valley Authority treatment. What else do you have? The Suez Canal. Suez Canal still has 8% of world trade. Why not widen it? Why not make that 10%, 15%, collect some tolls, and get the people working? Because the other big thing, of course, is unemployment. Well, we have, pretty good, we have about 22, 23% unemployment here. In reality, Spain has 20%. We just saw the Spanish foreign minister at the European Union meeting saying, we stand with the people in the streets. Yeah,
right.
As long as it's...
Before we get into the wider field, Webster, I want to go back to this area. Is this not a fleeing forward? The globalists knew that there might have been an actual democratic move against Mubarak, their old puppet, so they went ahead and triggered this now.
I don't see any organized opposition. As I say, the one group that stands out is this April 6th, and this is basically a group of NATO agents, right? They've taken over the same paraphernalia as the CIA was using in Belgrade and Serbia 10 years ago, 11 years ago now. So I don't see any real movement. There is no organized force. In a country like this, the policy alternative would almost have to emerge from inside the ruling party. Somebody interested in actual economic reform, which would not mean IMF, World Bank, Wall Street.
Webster, I want to go to some phone calls here on this subject, as I promised to. But before we do that briefly, give us your synopsis of what you believe is going to play out, what the general ramifications of this are going to be in the Middle East, in North Africa, into the rest of the Mediterranean, and then other movements you see around the world with the Soros-run gang calling for $100 trillion in additional banker bailouts to then leverage out to 59.9% credit card bills for the general public. What do you see happening when Ireland has this election, the move towards the EU falling apart? I mean, this is a desperate move, and just studying this, I see a lot of evidence that the New World Order is actually in deep trouble.
Well, I would say just on Egypt specifically, right? Today, the demonstrators, I call them the nihilists because I think that's what they are. Today, the demonstrators have called for a general strike. Now, they don't talk about this too much. The banks and other businesses are closed, but that was already announced during the weekend, and it's just part of the sort of attempt to cool down Cairo. So I don't know. They seem to be calling also for another general strike tomorrow. And above all, tomorrow they say they want to have a 1 million-man march. Well, we will see. And remember, watch out for those camera angles, right? If they're going to claim a 1 million-man march, we want to see the whole thing. We want to see an oceanic crowd. I don't think you're going to see it, not in this form. The other thing is that one of these groups has put out an ultimatum to the Egyptian army saying, we want to see which side you're on. Well, that sounds like something pretty desperate. Now, the awareness of the color revolution, of the techniques of this thing, I think has grown to the point where it's going to be increasingly harder to have more color revolutions, CIA, people power coups, postmodern putsches in these other countries. Algeria, big oil producer; Syria, very, very critical place; Russian naval base there; Jordan, always an important country; so forth. Libya, also oil. I think it's going to be harder and harder for the Anglo-American intelligence to organize this kind of thing in those countries. Now, that would obviously mean then a growth of other influence: Chinese, Russian, Brazilian, and perhaps also more independence on the part of countries like Turkey, which have been chafing under.
And we're already seeing that. Let me interject this. Again, last week, I know the Egyptians have reasons to be angry. I don't like Mubarak. But I, even last week, couldn't believe that the West, that these banking interests are this ruthless and this backstabbing to one of their own henchmen. But now, Tarpley, you're proven right again. It's completely admitted that they're doing this, and clearly they didn't just go after Egypt because it's one of the most populous in the region, but because it was one of the only countries that they've got their minions in, so that they could try to trigger a domino to fall. Could it be it was the only domino that they really thought that they could push over? And if it does fall over, will that signify the fall of Saudi Arabia, the fall of Jordan? I mean, those countries have got to be reassessing their deals they've made with the central bankers.
Yes, in the meantime, look at what happened in Sudan. The Anglo-Americans have been trying to bust up Sudan for decades, and they claim now that they've succeeded with this referendum, that the southern Sudan will secede from the north. I don't know what the reality is on the ground, but these are the reports, that the referendum in favor of independence has won. It's unofficial, but there it is. This is, of course, has nothing to do with human rights. It's because there's oil in the south, and the central government in Khartoum had been making deals with China. And, of course, the whole U.S. posture is use the human rights story to kick the Chinese out. Use any story. Use al-Qaeda. Use anything you can to kick the Chinese out. So, therefore, if Egypt falls, this would essentially mean a domino tsunami of destabilizations across North Africa, the Arab world, far beyond. It would probably spell the end of Pakistan as a centralized country. It would begin to reach into Iraq, into Iran, right? Because the Bernard Lewis plan, as it's called, foresees the Balkanizations, the carving of all of these places, right? 3 Iraqs, 5 or 6 Irans, Lebanon carved, Egypt gets carved, Sudan being carved.
So they're going for that Balkanization along religious and racial lines, but as you said, it's not going well for them anywhere. What does this signify? That the banking empire, using the U.S., Israel, England, and others as muscle, is finally stuck in the mud like Napoleon in Russia or Hitler in Russia or Barbarossa?
Something like this. In other words, the world historical significance of this for me is it's important for the Anglo-American imperialists to be defeated in the attempt to overthrow this government. It's just that simple. It's better for the world for the moment if this government stays the way it is. The status quo is better than what the Anglo-Americans would be offering.
And so they've got one more big, desperate push with this 1 million people to overthrow the government tomorrow.
Yes, and it seems to me that they just don't have it. I mean, I'm still looking at this Egyptian state television. Al Jazeera doesn't know what to do. Because
they've had their reporters arrested, which certainly shows that the honeymoon is over and that people are openly saying what Al Jazeera is, British intel.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it's been raving, foaming, unbelievable propaganda, right? And these completely fake things, that Mubarak went to Egypt, that Gamal Mubarak is now in London, that they're all fleeing, right, to try to develop some hype. The general idea, though, is that the influence of China, Russia, would increase in the Middle East, increase up to a point. In other words, the idea would be to have some situation where if a country didn't like the deal they were getting from the U.S., they could say, well, if you're really going to be this unreasonable, we're going to try the Chinese or the Russians or the Brazilians or the Venezuelans or somebody else. This generally leads to a more stable world situation. And with
balance of power.
Nasser was able to build the Aswan High Dam because he said to the U.S., will you help me build it? And John Foster Dulles said no. And then he said, well, I'll get the Soviets to do it. And they brought in an Italian engineering company, and they built it. So that's how you can get somewhere. So I think it's the unipolar world is beginning to crumble in some pretty key places, the Middle East obviously being about as key as you can. Look, in Iraq, the U.S. wanted Alawi, the puppet of the U.S., but they got Maliki, who's much more pro-Iranian. The government in Lebanon is not a U.S. puppet, but Hezbollah influenced. And if you look back then to Iran in the summer of 2009, that was supposed to be the Twitter revolution. It failed. If the one in Egypt fails, it means that the entire destabilization, which we've had since, Marcos in the Philippines in the mid-'80s, since the Shah was overthrown, because that's what that was too. That started and really all the way through was promoted by the U.S., by Carter and Brzezinski.
Yeah, and a lot of these backfire. Then we get the Islamic Revolution, but it's admitted our government overthrew the Shah because he wanted to actually develop the country. And
they wanted the Islamic Revolution. This was the whole point, that if you get a certain kind of Islamic government, they shut down the nuclear program, which was what was done in 78, 79.
So they have a Stone Age policy for the world, including here with their social Darwinistic Malthusian eugenics line. We're going to come back for 2 segments and take calls with Webster Tarpley, Joe, Patriot, Mike, Josh, and Lynn.
Hi, this is Alex Jones. Did you know that the global elite are now storing non-hybrid seeds in secret storage vaults near the Arctic Circle? Did you know that in a real meltdown, non-hybrid seeds can become more valuable than silver or gold? It's true, seeds have outperformed even gold and silver before in this country, and it's possible that could even happen again. So our friends at Solutions from Science have put together the perfect mix of non-hybrid seeds. They call it a survival seed bank, and it can produce an endless supply of nutrient-dense food for you and your family. And here's the best part. These seeds have not been genetically modified in any way, and you actually get enough seeds to plant a full-acre crisis garden. So visit them today at survivalseedbank.com. That's survivalseedbank.com, or give them a call at 877-327-0365. That's 877-327-0365. Remember, in a real crisis, non-hybrid seeds are the ultimate barter item. This is Alex Jones for survivalseedbank.com.
New year, new way to smoke, and it's totally wicked. Introducing Totally Wicked e-liquid electronic cigarettes, the highest quality e-cigarettes in the world. With Totally Wicked e-liquid cigarettes, there's no flame, no secondhand smoke, no carbon monoxide, no tar, no unsightly brown teeth or fingers, and no lingering smell. Totally Wicked e-liquid cigarettes have a battery charge that lasts up to 8 hours. Plus, with a Totally Wicked Tornado model, the average pack-a-day smoker is likely to save over $1,000.